So we're streaming live on Facebook and we are also recording. Raswayne, your camera, please. Go ahead, sir. The floor is yours.
Am I being heard? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, beautiful. Yes, Sister Colleen, are we, Brother Robbie, we're still holding. Is that correct?
I think we can go forward, Raswayne.
I'm sorry?
I think we can go forward, Raswayne.
Oh. Give thanks. My volume is very decreased. Yes, greetings and blessings to everyone. Give thanks for the moment and certainly the opportunity to still have a sharing moment in the Sosa Crew space. This particular session speaks to Rastafari and the future of Rastafari studies. And that in of itself connotates multiple things, including things that perhaps will challenge even ourselves as faculty in a space that has been created for Rastafari studies with some intentionality. And here we have a distillation, if you will, on how the first cadre of participants in our summer program looks at what they've received and potentially share what they believe could be beneficial for both themselves and those who would otherwise take participate in the future of Rastafari. So give thanks for all who have joined us. And I certainly want to welcome Ras Robbie, who has some questions from the previous session. And I will certainly examine those questions. But before he starts, I just wanted to just do a quick recap for I, speaking on the current Rastafari studies and what potentially the future looks like from I own IRIT and positioning. So I looked at early elders and prophecies in the Jerusalem schoolroom. That's part of the current Rastafari studies, Rastafari reflections. Jerusalem schoolroom will not change as part of the component of Rastafari studies. Elders and prophecies will equally remain part of the Rastafari studies. But certainly what was introduced in part by our beloved Mama Waleti, Rasses Jazanai, Dr. Beresford, and Dr. Rasses Jazanai, is that there is a perspective that comes from the feminine energy that is important to both the current and future of Rastafari studies. Equally, it's Rastafari scholars who present these new ideas, these new paradigms of examining our past, our present, and frame things for our future. So we give thanks for those Rastafari women who stood tall during the first sessions and brought us into the Jerusalem classroom. As I said Jerusalem schoolroom will remain an active part of Rastafari studies, but certainly the perspectives that are shared from the woman and from the Rastafari, let us call them street philosophers, but certainly the most important component of our learning came from those wise minds of Rastafari, many of whom did not go through the rigor of the school systems that I and I did, but they possessed and still possess knowledge beyond what could be fathomed. And this is why our beloved Walter Rodney spoke about groundings with my brethren. So their mind, their thoughts, their positioning will equally be reflected in the future of Rastafari Studies Jerusalem classroom environments. We then had researching Rastafari and exploring the genealogies, etc. And one spoke of the written Rastafari archives and scholarly works, and researching Rastafari certainly is an important aspect of the internal process that is embedded in the School of Sacrament Rastafari University. It certainly has been an active part of what the conventions, the academic conventions have been doing for many decades now. But in the future of Rastafari studies, those archives that have been written and the scholarly works that are in the public discourses will more be germane to and coming from the minds of Rastafari scholars, including, as I said, our indigenous scholars, those who went through no formal setting, but their contributions are priceless to the process. So what would be added then in my own thinking and framing is that the written Rastafari archives and scholarly works, mostly from Rastafari scholars, will dominate the space of Rastafari research. And certainly those who write additionally about Rastafari from the context of a scholarly research perspective would certainly now be citing more Rastafari scholars and have more of a tangential relationship than a direct relationship, because the community itself will be speaking from its own vernacular, from its own philosophies and its way of life. So that is my own distillation on that. We further had ganja, health and the law, criminalization of traditional healing plants, sacramental spaces and uses, and confusion in application and law on permitted use. I have criminalization on traditional healing plants will remain a critical part of the new economic paradigms in ganja health, because in the future of ganja health, there will be no legal impediments to Rastafari in the future. Sacramental spaces and uses will be more prominent and be more visible and be far more accepted in the larger society, especially if I and I move toward those claims demanding sovereign rights and spiritual sacramental rights, as we ought to, and is written somewhere in some legal script, but not enacted in practice. So the agitation then would not be so much in law, but to frame those impediments to our economic realities coming from herbs, including ganja, will be removed, and then new economic paradigms will be part of the discourse and study in ganja and health, so that our communities can be further empowered. And those are our papers that will be written, because we have spaces, as I said, like the School of Vision, spaces, as I said, like the Rastafari Indigenous Village, spaces like Mount Kailash, where active work takes place, and spaces all over the Caribbean where good Rastafari people are thinking through the processes and working through the economic realities, sometimes working around the law and sometimes within the restraints of the law, to ensure that there is an economic future for Rastafari communities from ganja. but I suspect that that future will create and will examine new economic paradigms coming out of the reality of ganja and its economic potentials. So then Rastafari and the world as one of the focal points of this summer institute. As I said, much of what would have been delivered in the webinar was placed on the foreburner so as to look at what was contemporarily impacting Rastafari in the world and the persecution that is being faced by many active members of the Rastafari community. But much of what has been shared, Brother Robbie, and this is where I'm going to ask you now, where our participants as students, students for life and students who are pursuing other more useful degrees in terms of their own work, they have brought forth a lot of the things that I and I have long thought of as necessary and are practicing in reality, and parts of what informed this School of Sacrament initiative. So, Brother Robbie, could we start with the first?
Yes, I give thanks. So one of the questions which the students came up with for this webinar was this: how can the notion of the indigeneity and sovereignty of Rastafari be advanced through Rastafari studies, especially in the context of climate crisis?
Give thanks for the question. And instead of first giving an opinion and sharing, I would like to invite perhaps someone like Ras Firstman, if he's on, who is literally involved in an ecologically friendly Rastafari environment, and who has been doing the work in a sustainable economic framework, to perhaps touch on that, and or Ras Jalani, who equally works in similar spaces. Right.
Yes, our first man is not here yet, so maybe Ras Jalani can.
Okay, give thanks. The question I think relates to indigeneity, that word, and sovereignty, and how is it that the project that is being described as Rastafari Studies can help in bolstering those important political claims, which is what they represent in the scheme of international relations. I think Rastafari Studies pioneers that notion of indigeneity in seeking to say that we constitute a faculty of interpretation in and of ourselves. We have, all of the acumen that grounds us as a part of inception, that gives us a full claim in terms of livity. That's how we describe it. And Rastafari Studies, I think, tries to create a space, especially within conventional institutional structures and thinking. It seeks to politicize the scholarship that Rastafari has naturally been a part of construction, post-coloniality, Black Atlantic, all of these imperatives for us to go forward as a people after imperialism and neo-imperialism. Rastafari brings those kinds of relevant conversations. So in a real sense, just based on the strategic collaborations that Rastafari hold, and I'm not talking about formal ones, but implicit ones by virtue of our expansion into places like New Zealand, among the Maori, in places where we have Native Americans, as far flung as Japan among indigenous communities of Ainu. These people are now expressing their contemporary self through the lenses, through the philosophies, you know, through the rhetoric that Rastafari has taught and enabled in a very accessible way. So Rastafari has already been claimed among the indigenous peoples of the world. And I think the space of Rastafari studies adds intellectual depth to that. What I've heard coming forward from much of the contributions is that, yeah, there's far more that we can be doing or should be doing at some point in time. But as an inception, to pull attention to its own capacity, and we're talking about representation, I heard conversations about student for life and academics, and you know, essentially to understand the ingredient of knowledge which needs to be universal, as natural as we assume the hegemony of English language and the thought process of white supremacy. Rastafari in its contemporary representation, and for me this is the link to other communities, other peoples such as ourselves. In creating a space called Rastafari Studies, what we are seeking to do is, as was mentioned in a previous preparatory meeting, we're establishing a kind of collective security. And that is not just for Rastafari, it's for people who hold the same processes, channels, relationships, and vision for themselves. And in a real sense, then, we are at the head of this conversation just based on the trumpet call of outstanding contributors, Peter Tosh, Bob Marley, you know, and it goes on and on, that the space that they construct as to how to relate to African redemption, and what African redemption means for humanity is really the conversation that continues. Many people are critical of, I'm not going to speak for much longer, of reggae as a genuine teaching space for Rastafari culture, theology, and all of the sophisticated lived aspects that we hold. But in essence, reggae is one of the tools that has to be kept close to our space. It is what has provided before the web Rastafari with that viral, penetrative capacity to tear down walls in the way that, you know, Bob Marley tells you he remembers when he was bringing down the walls of Jericho. So for me, the question posed by Petrie, I think it was, as it relates to this whole sovereignty and indigeneity as it had been described, is an important unifying and mobilizing strategy for formerly colonized people, especially those persons who have maintained their cultures, in spite of the conversation about erasure. Cultures still exist, and this is a part of the narratives that we have to help to strengthen. Just to close, some of what we are speaking about already is happening. And First Man that Ras Wayne called upon earlier would have been a good person to say this. They've been within the village context relating to cultures that are not Rastafari embedded, but are indigenous to this hemisphere, and participating in not just reasoning, but also ceremonies. So I think there is increasingly understanding among persons who are in the fight for total redemption, that there is a unification of purpose that we can find, especially among indigenous peoples, and many of them have already positioned themselves in better ways that can also provide examples. And, you know, I mentioned indigenous village, but Ras Ayavi in Jamaica has expanded this conversation with various North American native, you know, peoples. So I see there's an openness and an understanding of the solid connection. Maroons in Jamaica, likewise, Marcus Goff, who was here, has been doing work with the Maroon community. So just to see I see a threading together of understanding, including the Taino and other early regional people. All of those conversations have been increasingly brought into the Rastafari space, and acknowledging that Rastafari has what Buju Banton actually describes aptly, a kind of voice of the people that has remained true to that indigenous spirit.
Yes, give thanks to us, Janani, for that complete presentation, if you will. I'm going to ask if the rest of our speakers just be a little bit more brief with their responses, but part of the question also spoke of sovereignty and indigenous activity or existence through the lens of climate change. So it was specific to climate change, and this is in part why I thought of the spaces that seeks to lessen carbon footprints, etc., in terms of the work that's being done. But anyone else who wants to make a contribution to that, with the mindset also of Rastafari's own work and positioning on climate change and really salvation of the earth.
Yes, I can chime in, Ross Wayne, on that question. I think one of the interesting things that's going on right now, or has been going on for the past couple of years, in 2017, there was an All Africa Rastafari gathering in Shashamane, Ethiopia. And it was primarily organized by Rastafari Sistren, the late Sistren, Sister Ijanya, Christian, who since transitioned, was one of the spearheads of that conference. And one of the things that came out of that gathering was a document called the Shashamane Declaration. And in the Shashamane Declaration, you can read a commitment across the continent. And this gathering involved Rastafari from across the African continent, from the Caribbean, South America, Europe, North America. And one of the things that you see is a commitment to climate justice and climate change, and to intervening on the conversation around the climate crisis as an issue that is of the utmost, foremost in the minds of Rastafari, and according to this notion of sovereignty. So one of the things that came out of the gathering and this document was really proclaiming a specific stance, and I can share that document to proclaim a particular stance around self-determination of the Rastafari community to possess as well as reclaim land that had been stolen through colonialism, through imperialism, as well as try to establish intra-Africa trade one of the conversations at the gathering was about, if you have coconuts that grow in Jamaica or cocoa that grows in Ghana, how do you then facilitate trade across communities in the interest of promoting self-determination, which is one of the foremost principles of Rastafari. And then I think the other interesting thing that has come out of, for example, the Rastafari Millennium Council and its sort of proclamation around indigeneity is a encompassing of Blackness within an Indigenous framework. I think oftentimes people feel like Indigenous folks are not Black people, or African people cannot be Indigenous. But Rastafari has really expanded our conversation to really think about how Black people, how African people can be Indigenous, and how we can reclaim lands, ancestral lands that have belonged to us both on the continent as well as in the Caribbean context. And the last thing that I want to emphasize is the serious work that Sistren are also doing around the world in the realm of climate justice. We have Sister Akila Jaramogi, who has her, it's called a Fanzaman Reforestation Project in Trinidad and Tobago. And she's doing serious work where she has literally cultivated an ecological sustainable, self-sustaining community in Trinidad that was, before she actually did her work, it was polluted. There was no sort of ecology, sustainable ecology in that particular part of Trinidad, and she restored the watershed in that particular piece of land in Trinidad and Tobago. So Sistren are doing some serious work. There's also Empress Natika, who's based in the UK, as well as Empress Aymara, who's also based in Ghana, who started the Green Hope Seed Bank, where they actually exchange seeds around the world in efforts to plant as well as practice self-determination in terms of growing their own food, which is one of the things that the pandemic brought to us, was that scarcity can easily happen if we're not self-sustaining. So with that, I will close, but Sistren have been extremely important to these conversations.
Blessings, and give thanks, Sister Shamara, and I think that ties nicely into the notion of the ecological concerns leading into climate and impact on climate. But I do also want to ask a question to the rest of us, just as a part of the engagement, on the question of Indigenous identity and sovereignty. How does the issue of race impacts or is impacted in that conversation that needs to be at least established, because the question still speaks to sovereignty, Indigenous identity, and Rastafari as such. So it's to provoke that thinking. What would make others who are not of the African hue a part of that Indigenous community and or the sovereign nation of Rastafari? Give thanks. Brother Robbie, anyone?
Raswain, I was going to just do a little footnote to what Sishamara said, but it's on another topic, so it's all good.
No problem. So, okay, very well. Any takers? Well, perhaps it should just stew, but it certainly is interesting in the context of Rastafari studies and the particular question that was asked in terms of Indigenous identity and sovereignty. Give thanks, Brother Robbie. Any other sounds on that particular question? If not, Brother Robbie, you could go to the next, please.
Yes, but I did then just want to return to something that Sishamara said, and yes, and to well, maybe actually the question of race is related to Pan-Africanism insofar as in the diaspora, one of the logics used to dismiss the indigeneity of Rastafari is to say that those who were kidnapped and enslaved were no longer African, right? So that retrieval of that repair of that breach is a Pan-Africanism, which then speaks to the question of race and indigeneity. So maybe I'd say that about that question. But I was reading His Majesty's 1963 speech again, and what was, and of course I always used a bit about apartheid, right? But the other big warning that His Majesty was giving to the world was nuclear, right? And it was nuclear weapons. And much of that was occasioned by not actually, apart from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was occasioned by the testing, nuclear testing. And so the French had been doing it in Algeria. And so that was part of why His Majesty was talking about the threat of nuclear weapons, right? But it's the testing which is important. And I think that links to how I should see this climate crisis as not just an economic one, but a political one as well, because whenever there has been war, right, there has been massive environmental and ecological devastation. And the weapons that have been used over the last 20 or 30 years are often low-grade nuclear, right, which leave persistent effects on the land. So I would say that the work that the Sistine are doing is crucial, because it's also part of attending to the problem that we usually think of in terms of war, right? So these are not little things about environmental change. I have to connect that to the big questions of war and peace and collective security. Good, thanks.
And can I just add one thing to what Robbie said?
Please go ahead.
I think one of the things that I would also say is the role of Rastafari scholars is to really platform the work that people are doing, Rastafari people are doing around the world to address some of these issues. Because as Robbie said, these are not simple, easy things, and they need to be foregrounded as important parts of the broader conversation around the ecological crisis. So really, Rastafari scholars providing platforms for Rastafari people to speak around the work that they're doing in their communities.
Yes, give thanks, Sister Shamar, Robbie. Any other comments and statements? Those are important things, and in fact speaks to the future of Rastafari studies. And so I'm very grateful for the offerings. Any other comments?
Raswayne?
Yes, sis, go ahead.
Just a tech for you. If you turn your camera off, your bandwidth will work better for you.
Oh, I didn't know there was a problem with my bandwidth. I'm sorry.
It's low.
Okay, so
right.
I suspect that Sister Colleen just didn't like seeing us win. This is fine.
She likes hearing you. That's important.
It's not working for her. It's okay. All right. Give thanks. Is it a little better, Sister Colleen?
You're clear now. You were dragging, right?
That's all right. Give thanks. So the question is, or the issue is, if there are any other comments or questions on number one, then let us have them. If not, Robbie, let's go to number two.
Yes, sir. So this question, how can Rastafari studies decolonize the academy and institutions which lead white supremacy, especially in terms of the traditional academia community divide?
Could that be read one more time, Brother Robbie? A little slower?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How can Rastafari studies decolonize the academy and the institutions which lead white supremacy, especially in terms of the traditional academia and community divide?
Okay, so that's an interrogation into perhaps the future of Rastafari studies on the impact it can have on academia. And the question then is broad and certainly out there. And I'd like to invite, I'm not sure if Mama Waleti did join us, but I know that she was to have been part of this hosting. So I'm not, if she's with Ian, I'd welcome her at this time. Perhaps
Wayne, we have Mama Eleanor, who might be well suited to maybe address that question if she wants to.
Oh, I'd love so much for beloved Mama Eleanor to speak if she'd so be so kind. And I do see Rastjalani's hand is up. So perhaps Mama Eleanor, if you could start, and your office allows you, you know, the free man and responsibility to speak very candidly to us as your own children, so to speak. So give thanks for your presence. Okay, perhaps Mama Eleanor, I'm not sure if she's able to speak, but if not, let's start with our beloved Bonganaya.
Her mic is now open. Mama Eleanor's mic is open.
I'm sorry, I cannot really speak as I am driving.
Okay.
So I will come in later on the
Thank you
discussion.
so much, Mama. Blessings, give thanks. Thank you. Bonganaya.
Yeah, at risk of probably talking too long, I can share the inception of Rastafari Studies as a project in my time at the University of the West Indies. And I say in my time because I think it has been an ongoing project of sorts, formally and informally. What it meant for us after Planner's arrival on campus was how to maximize the attention that students could give to someone like him as a resource. And thus came courses that complemented immersive content, which is what Plano would represent in Rastafari. Along with the courses, we also developed a system of taking students to Nyahbinghi as a part of their requirements. And this was not just transformative for students. And I've had almost 30 years of taking students to Nyahbinghi with various testimonies that are really compelling. So in a sense, and what students say is that outside of this framework, they would not have ventured into such spaces. They were happy for guided facilitation into Rastafari experience. It allowed them to engage in a certain kind of serious and critical way with takeaway that often lingered way beyond. So in a sense of dialogue, I think Project of Rastafari Studies is anchored on grounded scholarship in and of itself linked to the reality of our community, which can be consistently bridged and represented in reality to students, to bring students into committed engagement by way of seeing how it is that in their own parochialities they can do what they can do. And that has given us really good documentation of otherwise unknown people that students have engaged and encountered. It has opened up research agenda into their own micro focus areas, their own interior stories. So in a real sense, what I've gathered from my experience in the formal academy is that students consistently say that there is no other course like this that allows them to engage with themselves and an alternative cosmological space of intellectual inquiry. I think just to seal up, I know Raswayne don't want me to talk for too long. There are others here. But when we did the inaugural Rastafari Studies Conference in 2010, Rasipo from South Africa wrote to us saying that just the notion, just the idea that a university was holding a conference on something that was still not so central in South Africa allowed him to apply for funding and a whole different level of the academic response from their own institutions. So in small ways, I think the presence of scholarship named Rastafari studies in the academy begins to deconstruct some of the things that they tell us about what we can study and how we can say what we wish to say.
Give thanks, Bunganaya, Rastafari, blessings. Are there any additional comments in that space? I'd like to frame a question, if not, but I'm giving that opportunity.
Rasmin?
My lord, go forward.
Rasmin?
Yes, please go forward, my brother.
Yes, listening to and observing the whole concept of Rastafari studies and looking at how you would build, especially in an alternative academy, in terms of, you know, to what UE might be integrating in their way. In our mind, in my mind, I would like to see Rastafari studies take on this as a foundation, the study of Haile Selassie I, and in terms of as a pillar for the Rastafari studies unit, looking at it at school. Why? Haile Selassie is the foundation of Rastafari, all right? Inclusive of Mama Menon, but from the foundation, we're looking at Haile, the power. We're looking at the power of the Trinity. And from there, everything falls into place in terms of everything else that you want to deal with within that scope. Also, I would see that if you creating a Rastafari studies as an alternative to what is there, which is the University of West Indies, Mona, I would like to see that a different direction taken, because somewhere along the line, the University of West Indies or any other university that would always have a threshold within the Babylon structure still. So you want to be able to if you want to decolonize the academy, you got to break all that down and come with a whole different dynamic in terms of how we look at Rastafari studies as a relevant piece for the future.
Yeah. Give thanks, my beloved brother. Give thanks. I'm not sure if there's any other sounds on it, but those were very good points being made by Ras Sekou. Any other sounds?
I'm ready, my brother.
Rastafari.
Yes, Ras Kaimo here. I fully concur with all the kinds of things that Brother Jelani was saying, as well as Brother Sekou. But there are some other possibilities here. One of the things that has happened in white institutions over probably the last 25 years, 30 years, is the recognition that working with indigenous communities should be seen as a privilege in which the communities get to dictate the terms of research. So in the case of Rastafari, there have been moves made by the Millennium Council around issues of intellectual property and entailments of such that would perhaps limit the kinds of access that researchers like myself had. The terms of engagement would have been very different. For example, in 1980, if when I had been in Jamaica, the Nyahbinghi House came and said, we're interested in a certain kind of research. We're interested in a research that will benefit I and redress many of the injustices, the many injustices that Rastafari has suffered over the years. So if Jakes wants to take on that kind of research, then entry would be permitted.
Give thanks, my brother.
Otherwise not. So I think those kinds of things are something that is worth thinking about in the future.
Give thanks, my Lord. Yes, sir. Blessings on those sounds. It seems to me, though, that even in the conversations that and the sharing coming from Raseko, Rasjalani, and Brother Jake, there seems to be a lack of connectivity, if you will, to the first question on identity, indigenous identity and sovereignty in the context of an institution and the establishment of an institution that has a different view of the world. It seems as if the conversations tie us in a dependent or co-relationship manner with something else that's established, when it is that Sosa Crew is establishing a vehicle through which Rastafari studies comes from the mind and vernacular of Rastafari, from the communities of Rastafari, and certainly within the aspirations, if not the deliberate working towards sovereignty of the Rastafari people. So perhaps I and I should be thinking of the future of Rastafari studies in the same context as we look at current Jewish or Islamic studies, etc. Not necessarily from a religious perspective, but from a community of interest perspective, where it is the group and the community that's establishing a forum and a format through which others can come in and study based on that community's whole way of being. And I think Bunganaya and Ras Seiko equally spoke to that, but I'm just expanding it a bit further to say, how about sovereignty and the independent schools, university that speaks completely to that. So any questions, sounds, or comments on that can equally be entertained. Give thanks.
Ras Wayne, that where the I left it actually speaks to another question. So let me just put that in the chat, because it relates directly to what I was just saying. And so this question in chat is, who is not represented in Rastafari studies, and how can Rastafari studies address the multiple exclusions of the most down-pressed? Who is not represented in Rastafari studies, and how can Rastafari studies address the multiple exclusions of the most down-pressed? And that just kind of resonates with the I's point about sovereignty and knowledge.
Rastafari, give thanks. And if I may, I would perhaps start with a response to it, in a way to not justify exclusion, but certain to say Rastafari studies is about Rastafari, Rastafari people, Rastafari the man, as our beloved Raseko just said. It's Haile Selassie first is the premier of Rastafari, and the study of Rastafari should be the looking at the people who have embraced the identity of Rastafari, leaders to be respected, and how their journey has taken them from 1930-32 or so all the way to 2021, and where they are heading, because they have been have been engaged in framing and shaping our own worldview, and how that worldview has now been impactful on contemporary society and the dead contemporary society, indeed, all Rastafari moving forward. So yeah, it has to be in that space. It has to be from that perspective. Yes, sir.
If I may.
Just sharing, Jelani, just 1 second, that on Facebook, Andrea Bukad is also sharing that Future of Rastafari studies should also include a return to the open air universities for the Rastafari family. So just wanted to include that in our reasoning, so we don't leave Facebook audience out.
Raswell, if I may.
Yes, please. And then Rastalan, go forward. Yes.
I agree with exactly the perspective that you are putting forward. When you made reference to the Islamic school and the the Jewish school. I do not see Rastafari institution trying to compete or trying to be better than, or whatever the case may be. To me, it's a way of thinking, a way of reasoning. And therefore, we should have an institution such as this, which allows you a different perspective. Rastafari is man generally, man and woman generally. Therefore, we are looking at all peoples. We're not excluding anyone. We are excluding people who do not wish to engage in our way of thinking. And I think we wouldn't be establishing an institution along the lines of UWI, for example. It would be more along the lines of the theological institutions which examine everything in life and how it is influenced by how we think. As perhaps you're aware, there's an ongoing discussion at the moment about Marcus Garvey University. The purpose of the Marcus Garvey University is to examine life from an African perspective, to examine life using the methodologies and the principles that guide the original African existence, not the Greek or whatever it is. So I think maybe there is a disconnect in this discussion, because Rastafari studies, if it is going to be the foundation for this institution, it is not simply a set of books that we have to read. It is being immersed in this experience of Rastafari as the Jewish experience, as the Islamic. Maybe I'm being too simplistic, but this is sort of where my head is at.
Thank you so very, very much, beloved Dr. Eleanor Wint, Mama Eleanor. Yes, we need you in the space, seriously need you in the space as we continue to work, so that we'll be able to continue framing what is best as a product coming out of our history and our narrative. So let's keep the work going forward. And this is partly why we reached out and we begged and beseeched, because we need that type of stability and maturity and longevity in terms of the Rastafari experience as we further distill this work among ourselves and others. So any other sound, Ras Jelani? I know you were coming in before.
Give thanks and give thanks for the words from Sister Eleanor. I wanted to a comment about the inclusion of what people were suggesting as the non-scholar. And in my mind, you know, Rastafari as a movement is really its own scholarship. The iris it takes to manifest is a proper engagement with real ideas and coming to real overstanding, and it's an embodied scholarship. And in a sense, I think that is the spirit of the work that we do here. Most recently, I've been immersed in the space of the Chalice camp. But that is really in my mind, and you know, ethics and these things could say otherwise, is in my mind an attempt to not just document, but to expose this as a space of pedagogy on its own terms, with its own logic, with its own, you know, intellectual ethos and spirit, aesthetics, and within that space, the, you know, requirements is being able to sit up and hold a reverence in the way that has been maintained by the tradition. And in real terms, I think that the time spent by individuals in these spaces is approximate to proper studies that people would do at various different levels. Ideas are churned over and new inventions come into being in this kind of space. Now, the space is understood in Jamaica as a weed yard, you know, a place where Rastaman is. But is it understood as the foundation of our economy, of our daily meeting lives, and what maintains our community on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment way, that helps in terms of financial support, emotional therapy when necessary, counseling for family members, a complex space. And I'm saying that those are adjunct services in addition to the teaching. And so in my mind, there is that kind of imperative for scholars, the way Sister Shamara indicated that a part of our responsibility has to be to be able to represent the things that are happening, that are real, that people are not speaking about in a critical sense. So I think there is a boundary that we have suggested that is driven by formal academic training that was given by Western schools. And I don't think that is really the ethos that we are representing. There are many among us who have documented themselves, who have painstakingly self-published some of these accounts, persons who have made films. I mean, Sister Faye, Return to Ethiopia, a number of really excellent scholarship that comes from our place, that is a part of what we hold as things to celebrate and share, and to maintain as part of what we are and seek to represent. So that's just my response to the connectedness. I think the issue that this space of scholarship provides is a certain kind of devotion and resources that might not be affordable or available to everyone. So in a sense, it's a space that has responsibility, because, you know, all of this time locked up onto your own ideas shouldn't be so much of your own ideas, is really what I think I hear us saying more and more.
Give thanks, my Lord. Give thanks, Rastalani. I would like really to invite comments from even among the present, the faculty who are present, and also the participants as students who are here, just on the questions that you all shared and the responses to them, and even the additional comments that have been made, just to get your input. Certainly, it's welcome, but do recognize that even this becomes part of what Rastafari is intentionally doing as part of its own archival and collection objective. So thank you for being in that space too. Thank you. Ras Robbie, is that a move toward the mic? Thank you.
Ras Wayne, can we share one more question?
Please go ahead.
Give thanks. So hold on, I'll put it in the chat. Hold on. So it's a bit of a long one because I've just kind of broadened it out a little bit, but let me read it. what future relationship should there be between Rastafari studies and Ethiopian studies in regards to empowering the message of the Rastafari movement? More broadly, how do we deepen connections between Rastafari knowledge cultivation across the diaspora and on the continent? So yeah, that would be one that we could have a little reason on that. And I know Sister Shamara had some thoughts of that in one of our sessions, Resway.
So we therefore, and I therefore welcome Sister Shamara, perhaps to share those thoughts as we seal forward. Yeah, please, God, Sister Shamara.
Give thanks. So there, I want to start with the academy more broadly. So of course we know that most disciplines, history, philosophy, social in the social sciences and humanities have all been formed in white supremacy and are rooted in white supremacy. So disciplines like ethnic studies, disciplines like Black studies, Africana studies, and of course now Rastafari studies are challenging those disciplinary formations that we have. But one of the things that you continue to see, even with our Rastafari studies, even with our Africana studies, Black studies, is still a tension in terms of the relationship between how we study the content of Africa as well as how we study the diaspora. So there have been scholars who've written about how Rastafari has become overrepresented in Ethiopian studies to the point where Ethiopians themselves are no longer being foregrounded in terms of their particular perspectives. Other people have said that Ethiopian scholarship should be, more prominent and central. One of the things that I think that we have to think about in this question is the broader political economy around knowledge and who has access, as Ras Jalani was saying, to be able to publish, to be able to participate in academic arenas. So, if a scholar from North America, like myself, or from Europe has access to particular types of publishing, then it means maybe our Ethiopian brothers and sisters who also have access to publishing may not have as much access to things like distribution. So how are we able to use our resources that we are imbued with to actually help with the distribution of other people's scholarship, as well as attending to the self-published books and articles and zines and other types of, some people call it ephemera, that Rastafari have produced. One of the things that I do in my work is think about the fact that Rastafari have their own intellectual history. We have our own ways of understanding the world and the world of ideas. And so that needs to come with a particular type of politics of citation. So citing Rastafari people as being the people that are essential in scholarship is critically important. And I think, quite frankly, people who have been left out of scholarship, to respond to the previous question and incorporate into this question, are Black women. Black women in the Rastafari movement have often not had an opportunity to produce volumes of scholarship. Actually, if we think about it, a lot of Rastafari scholarship has been written by white scholars, in addition to African studies. If you look at a lot of African studies, it has also been written by white scholars. And so how do we try to decolonize that process to make space and center the most vulnerable amongst us? And lastly, I think I mentioned in previous sessions that if we lead with the ethic of humility, accountability, and reparations, then we can't go wrong. And I think even leading with an ethic of reparations in terms of the scholarship that we produce, that we are addressing the most harmed in our communities, and we're lifting up the issues that are of significance, are of importance. And so I think, I hope that seeks to answer some of the question. I know it doesn't speak to all of the question, but definitely, helps the conversation.
I just wanted to add that, Sister Shamara nicely indicated that there is a perception that Rastafari has too much infiltrated. And I was a part of one such Ethiopian studies conference. Myself and Erin McLeod, we were presenting some work. And you know, it was really a political conversation to disrupt the Ethiopian studies narrative about an Ethiopian diaspora, or a narrative that relates to the diasporic Ethiopian identity that needed to be heard within the Ethiopian studies context. As far as I'm concerned, I think, you know, just the ethos of Rastafari in and of itself makes it a connected conversation. But Sister Shamara has indicated to you that, you know, has always been a very white space, all of these niche disciplines. And interestingly, the Ethiopian Studies Conference I attended, all of the experts were white Europeans. So, you know, that just tells you.
Sister Shamara, if I may, Sister Shamara, I am listening, and I keep feeling that this is the point. This is the point, the essential point, that it cannot be another area of study in a white dominated institution. It has to be an institution in itself, that when you go into that institution, you have to appreciate, as Brother Jelani points out, the ethos of the situation. It's very difficult for me to conceive of Rastafari studies as just another thing that I tick off on my list of studies that I have done.
Exactly, Mama Eleanor, and give thanks for that feed forward. One of the things that I often think about as I pursue my own work is the example of somebody like Linda Tahiwa Smith. Linda Tahiwa Smith is an Indigenous Maori scholar from New Zealand. And one of the things that she was able to do, she wrote a book called Decolonizing Methodologies, which thinks about these very topics that we're thinking about right now. But one of the things that she actually did is take her knowledge and resource back to the Maori communities in New Zealand to actually build institutions. So they have their own university right now. They have K through 12 schools. And that's something that I've always wanted to do. That's actually the reason why I got my PhD in Africana Studies, was to build Pan-African free schools. And so I think that, you know, there has to be a broader purpose for which Rastafari studies is being instrumentalized. It cannot just be, as you're saying, for us to put more books on the bookshelf. It has to be about actually doing the work, the liberty. Give thanks.
Yes, give thanks, Sister Shamara and Mama Eleanor Wint. I suspect that there's another question, Ras Robbie.
Yes, there is, and apologies all, because I'm just no good at doing this, chatting to this person, chatting to that person. So there's a couple of messages I put out, which were for us, Dominic, but I put out to everyone. There were organizational issues. So here's the last question that we have, Raswan. But by the way, Sis Shamari, you know, Ngugi wa Thiong'o's Decolonizing the Mind was presented first, right, at University of Auckland to Maori people, right? You know, yeah.
Well, she actually, Linda Tahiwa Smith draws inspiration from Ngugi wa Thiong'o.
Yes,
so, yes.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I've been in the marae there where they've had Wakanyate, who's a Kenyan playwright, speaking with Maori people and you know, speaking in 2 or 3 languages. None of them are English, right? So it's, yeah. Right. So here's, oh no, that's the last one. Apologies, 1 minute. So this is the last question that the students had, Ras Wayne. Oh man, why is my copy and paste? Let me read it out and then I'll type it in. computer's not working. What are some of the tools for exploration of the Rastafari trod through creative spaces? How has the Rastafari presence in these types of spaces impacted the globalization of Rastafari? So what are some tools for exploration of the Rastafari trod through creative spaces? How has the Rastafari presence in these types of spaces impacted the globalization of Rastafari? Russ Wayne, I know we have our brethren, Russ Kurt, who is a documentary filmmaker and might be well disposed to address that question if Russ Kurt is around.
Please invite Russ Kurt on, of course.
Give thanks, family. Rastafari be praised. Yeah, give thanks for, I mean, it's a privilege to be in the space of greatness. So give thanks for the enlightenment and the input. I mean, just from a perspective of how kind of the visual landscape and the kind of visual iconography of how I personally promote kind of Rastafari pedagogy through my body of work. I mean, so there's multiple layers, right? So there's one whereby the kind of scholarship that has been produced over many, many years and which I definitely, benefit from in terms of using it as a form of inspiration and in creating, films about these stories. And so, and part of it as well, part of that narrative of creating stories really is the main motivation is kind of advocacy, right? Using film as a kind of as a pedagogy for social change, but also to kind of raise a greater awareness about the broader discourse on promoting Rastafari way of life, right? Which is really embedded in society across the world in all spheres, right? The concept of each one teach many, right? Each one teach one. The idea of caring for one's neighbor, the kind of ecological promotion of green economy, etc. And coming back to this idea of what is Rastafari's take on contribution, to kind of the kind of Green Revolution discourse. I'm going to use a reference to a film I made, a few films I've actually made over a number of years, which is really about kind of experiencing the lived experience within Rastafari communities, and just really capturing and observing the way of life, around food, indigenous medicine. The idea of how do we create sustainable communities, societies at large, and these are films. In fact, I'm going to share a link to our channel, YouTube channel, and one can view these films. Some of the films have been about how do we, what is Rastafari's contribution about the idea of spatial violence, colonial spatial planning, and these are films I've created about the history of gentrification. In fact, one of the characters in one of my last films is Tabiel, who was actually the cousin of Maurice Bishop from Grenada, and she actually ended up in the States after the assassination of her cousin. So just in terms of how I capture the story of Rastafari in a kind of more in a broader sphere, of creating a tapestry of the various lived experience of Rastafari, whether it's on the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean, in Latin America, in North America, etc. I mean, one of my challenges and something that I've been thinking about and working through is also about financial stability as well, right? To create these films, but in create an economy as well that's not based on kind of capitalist ideologies, right? But it's really about the creating community, right? So we can then create, I guess, more work. And also part of it also kind of my own personal activism about teaching young people about cinema, teaching young people about how to read cinema as well. Because with a kind of mass production of media, young people's minds get propagated. So how do I counter that? Through the pedagogy of Rastafari. So that's really been I guess, my own personal experience of creating creative work through the lens of Rastafari. Give thanks.
Russ Robbie or Russ Wayne, Carrie's hand is up. I was noting based on the question that I saw Warrior King in the Zoom as well. I don't know if he wanted to comment on the creative space.
Let's go forward, Sister Caris, please. Give thanks, Sister Colleen. Sister Caris.
Greetings, everyone. Give thanks again. Let me lower my hand. This question, sometimes when we use a lot of words, it kind of confuses me. What is at the core of it? What is this question asking as it relates to the university? What are the tools for exploration, and how has the Rastafari present impacted the globalization? What you mean, what are some of the tools? Can somebody answer?
Yeah, the person who posed the question, Russ Robert, do you recall?
I don't recall actually, but it was in our student reasoning.
All right. Well, I wanted to make sure that I was addressing it because it wasn't so clear. However, one thing that I will speak of as it relates to the Rastafari University and how it can
methodology.
Yeah, I'm trying to take down the hand. Methodology. Right. I want to speak about the university and how in its context of educating people on Rastafari, it can create a space to discuss the creative industries and how it will impact, the globalization or people's understanding of Rastafari. I have a very interesting experience that I can recall with an elder named Bongo Hugh. Ones on the webinar may know him. He's a doctor, Rastafari, and so he has a mix of the scientific world and the heretical world. And when I had a reasoning with him one day, this man was burning out Bob Marley, and the beautiful thing about Rastafari is that it gives everybody the space to be themselves and think freely and express. So when him a burn out Bob Marley now, I rate Bob Marley on a heretical level, not looking at the things that people try to say are his flaws with the women, etc. But as a one who humbled himself to Rastafari, gave constantly in his interviews, if you ask him questions, it's three things him focus on. Him going to tell you, say, Rasta is the future, him going to tell you about ganja, and him going to tell you about Haile Selassie. The only time them could distract him sometimes is when them ask him about the women now, and him going to laugh because him really say all of them is female, But if you look at him at the core of his being, he, and we spoke about it too in one class, he did this mighty work in terms of carrying the name of Rastafari, spreading the message of love, etc. And here I am in front of an elder who is burning him out. So when I listen to the elder now, what he had to say, and there are people who are in the Boboshanti who hold this similar view, that they don't rate the Rastas because they bring all kind of people into the thing, and they bring in people and people don't understand the thing properly, and then the thing kind of like waters down, So even when we're on the discussion of how the current artists are kind of exploring their version of Rastafari, how they dress, how they act, how they live, etc., there are many people who will get confused and say, what is really, Rastafari? A lot of time there are youths who will call me and they say, this person is a Rasta because I see him do this and I see him do that. So I was happy to see the resource that I believe it was Dominic or somebody shared, that there is a set of ones who met now and created this code of conduct of the Rastafari artists. So I've certainly saved it and I do intend to look through it. But one thing that we do know is that the creative medium is a very easy space for people to access any kind of knowledge. So music has a lot of impact, video has impact, we're using social media, all of these platforms. And the beautiful thing about Rastafari is that it gives everybody a space to be themselves and manifest their version of it. However, there are certain things that are core to it that need to be established. And I guess this is what first one was also saying, that on a level, there's a great responsibility on the academics to document certain things so that people can have a fullness to say, well, this is what Rastafari is, and this aspect of it is free enough for somebody to interpret, because there are many people who are concerned about what the future of Rastafari is going to look like just based on the sounds that the artists have now, which is hybrid and not the traditional like 1-2 roots and 1 drop kind of thing. And you know how they're dressed, how they're acting sometimes, how they speak. So yeah, I think there is a space for there to be a topic around the creative industries and Rastafari. Not sure what was intended in terms of that question, but I just wanted to share as somebody who works in the creative and wellness industries.
And if I may, Russ Robbie or Russ Wayne, jump on Carice's wagon for a second, that my first introduction to Rastafari didn't come through music. It actually came through theater when I was in a play in my first year at UWI called Barjona, which was really the story of Alexander Bedward and the exploration of madness at the time, the idea that this man was mad. I remember singing this song, Madness, Madness, Madness is not a madness, but a gladness. So that was my first exposure to Rastafari. So the theater worked. I have read Derek Walcott's O Babylon. So looking at how the Rastafari is treated in the creative space. I know Walcott got a lot of beating on how Rasta was represented in that space, but all the creative arts from literature, when we move literature to film or theater, of course, music is perhaps the most popular conversation we have on Rastafari, not just by what the artists are saying, but how we see them living and how we see them living kind of adopted. So I just wanted to be mindful that I also joined a group of young Rastafari creatives, and I'm very curious to see how that will manifest in the near future, how they'll come together, because the Rastafari creatives wide from, and the creative industry now is shifting from traditional film and music to this kind of social media space as well. How do we take advantage of new media to advance the message? I just wanted to drop that in on top of what Sister Carice was sharing.
Yes, give thanks, Sister Colleen and Sister Carice before then. Very well stated, very appreciative. Any other comments or questions? Creative arts, Rastafari studies, impact. Okay. All right, well.
I just wanted to ask,
Colleen, you were, go ahead.
I wanted to, someone earlier on mentioned that there are times, I'm going to paraphrase to say that there are times when it appears we're speaking academies and some it intimidating for some, but for consideration to be given for academics to work with creatives to articulate or to share the information so that it addresses a bigger audience. There are some who won't read as easily, but they will access documentaries, they will access films. So just kind of, so I'm happy like a Russ Curtis in this space who is able to translate the academies for the average audience. So I think it's important that we don't, because we've had students who've said they've expressed some amount of discomfort or not very comfortable sharing in this space because they feel that they're not at the same academic level. But to be clear that we can impart the same information, not negating how important academics are or scholarship is, but presenting it in a way that is accessible to everyone. I saw Imani in here, and I know we had a local group called Sistering Theatre Collective, so I have to be very cautious. Each time Shamara mentions Sistering, I think of Sistering Theatre Collective which were a group of scholars and uptown Jamaican women who were sharing common stories that were impacting women, impacting the poor Jamaican in a creative way, but taking it to the communities. So I guess I'm just restating that for emphasis, because I do think that sometimes what we have is just a gathering of people who are learned and not so much impacting community because we've not made it accessible to community.
Very, very well noted, beloved Sister Colleen. And it is my own heavens that what has taken place here over the past 8 days, 9 days has been at the level where ones would appreciate of it, would be able to receive it on multiple levels, and have been instructed by it, enthused by it, inspired by it, and certainly we want to see its growth and further development, because I think it was brought at every level to our people. And as such, I am pleased so far. And I suspect Sister Colleen is sharing with us what we ought not to make happen as we further develop Rastafari studies and establish our own institutions to distill those studies. Any other questions or comments?
Yes,
Yes, Ras Seiko, give thanks.
Yeah, I want to support what Sister Colleen said there, as a person who working in different levels of the community. I realize that the simpler we make information for the masses of people, is the more we are able to reach them. Like for instance, like I would like to see more writings in the sense that books being published, yes, about Rastafari intellectuals who are writing and researching about Rastafari, not from a Ivy level of watching from the top, but the involvement as somebody like Rodney in 1969, who took time as a scholar and a scholar of the first class level. We all respect Rodney from a level of a serious intellect. But he took time out of his busy schedule at UWI Mona to intermingle mainly with Rastafari people and those dispossessed people throughout throughout Kingston and other parts of Jamaica to emphasize the importance of Rastafari people, more so knowing about their history, but not from a level of where they cannot relate it, because how we relate it, the masses of people is very important. How they're able to identify with it, because most people in the Caribbean, most of Jamaica, and even the Caribbean, because in the Caribbean, I remember one day I walked in the street of Dominica, and a brethren asked me for some money, and not a Rasta, and I said I didn't have it, and he said, "You know no Rasta, because if you expect a Rasta would take out his last penny and give it to him, because that is how the perspective of how they see a Rasta man in that humane level of looking at things." And now we have books, but I would like to see some of these books transform into films. I'd like to see some of these books transform into audio, where people become more and more youth and not reading, but they might listen to our audio or they might watch a documentary. But I support what Sister Pauline saying, because it's very important that we put out more scholarly writings, but simplified, so the regular, ordinary person, Rastafari the most, not that the Rastafari people are not brilliant, they are very brilliant, as Bongo Naya say, because we have our own, we have generated our own, the elders. I mean, nobody who could outwit and see what they were saying. They were saying they were brilliant, from Howell, from Alexander Bedward, all the way to some of the Rastafari elders who still remain with us now. So I totally support that, and I think that we need to see more writings from within I&I. That is our scholarly nature, but simplify.
Rastafari, give thanks. That is
Give
from
thanks.
one of our elders. Yes, Raskar.
Wayne, give thanks.
Yes, I go forward, man.
Blessed love. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to also just pick up from Raseko on the importance of this, the idea of the finished product, right? The finished, book and film, etc. But also, I also want to emphasize that the importance of archiving, right? Archiving and as part of the kind of process of restoration, right? Kind of the idea of memory, the restoration of memory. In the broader context, as we are fighting for reparations as well, right? Kind of how do we use the visual language, visual archive, photos, text, music, etc. And also, I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking about at the moment, and I've shared this obviously with Ras Wayne about, how do we, for example, archive the work of Idol, for example, right, over the last X amount of years. And create a portal, right? Whether it's through an online platform, a website, etc. And store. I mean, my greater vision is to kind of have create a global, Rastafari archival portal, right? With where one could actually kind of embed and find some kind of form of synchronicity in terms of the work that people are doing across the world. So I just wanted to emphasize the importance of archiving I&I story, give thanks.
If I may, Raswayne, I wanted to draw attention to one of the readers on the reading list as well. Roger May says, Brother Man, for those who haven't yet read it, should perhaps look at it. I remember reading it as a youth, very young, and then rereading it as an adult with a better sense of Rastafari. But I think it's a good literature. I know this morning Lioness spoke about resources for her children. And I think that's one of the good references we have on our reading resource to access a Brother Man when we can.
Yes. Give thanks, Sister Colleen, Ras Kurt, Ras Sekou, and all others who have spoken on this particular issue. I see Sister Shamara also said this is so important an issue. It is making sure that as we create content, as I create content, then we make sure it's accessible to all in our community and outside of our community, speaking at the highest level of our capabilities, but in the most useful and simple language that educates and empowers. So give thanks. Rastafari Studies, the future of Rastafari Studies is a bright one. It's one that engages new thinking and next steps in our humanity. It certainly will be independent. As I see Eduardo raises his hand, please go ahead, Eduardo.
Daniel as well as Sister Shamara, and just giving a time check at the same time.
Give thanks. I'll be quick, very quick. Lots of food to digest. Give thanks. A lot of food to digest. Going back to what Ras Sekou, what Ras Jalani, and what dear Mama Eleanor were speaking. As Ras Sekou said, the pillar should be the study of Haile Selassie. I was thinking about in the book Selected Speeches, there's a quotation that says any portion of this book could be reproduced by any process, which could be video, which could be audio, which could be music or documentary, without any permission. So without permission, like it's open for all this so you can digest this into easier versions. Then the other thing, what Jalani was saying about the ethos of the chalice space in regards to the Jerusalem schoolroom, I think is also very important. And then finally, what Mama Eleanor said, that some of the questions were kind of conflicting. I think that the Rastafari studies or university approach should be decolonizing by making everything free and easily accessible to anybody, and just take a guerrilla approach towards it, a very guerrilla approach, very militant approach, and try to spread everything. We have technology. Who's to say that everybody in this meeting in different parts of the world can make a Zoom account and host free reasoning sessions where topics will be discussed and they can further into action, and then it can be brought back together and tied into the whole community. And that's the give thanks for letting me speak.
Yes, there were two other people. Sister Colleen.
Russ Wayne, there was Sis Lioness, I know had the hand up. Can't see it now, but and then
Yes.
Sis Mar.
Yes, please go ahead, sis.
Okay, give thanks. In relation to the question about the creative space, I'm just gonna take the opportunity, since I realize that there's some creatives on here, and also that there are persons working, in the community who have access to creatives. There is a severe paucity of materials specifically for children. I can find picture books, storybooks about principles and teachings of every other religion, every other faith, every other cultural movement. I mean, there's the ABCs of the Black Panther Party. You can easily introduce that to, a 2-year-old. And the only thing, for the most part, that Rastafari has produced in terms of getting the message written and sharing it with ones are mostly academic books. No pictures, a lot of multi-syllable words. A 6-year-old he might be able to read it, but will he be able to understand it? And so when I believe it was Carice, or maybe it was Colleen, when someone mentioned just the fact that we need to make the message more accessible, the accessibility needs to not just be, the man on the street, but also the child. So I just wanted to put that out there, specifically in terms of documentaries too, for Brother Kurt. Give thanks.
Yeah, man, Rastafari, give thanks. That is important. That is important. That is so very, very important, because this is community oriented. It speaks from the child to the parent, the family, and the extended community. So give thanks, beloved, for that sharing. Sister Colleen, you had someone else or something else?
I dropped a link in the chat for Lioness to see. Sister Eleanor has a website with meeting the authors of kids book, and so I've also put that in. It includes her own work. So I've shared the link so that we can also access it.
Excellent. We do have Brother Man, my favorite book, and we have 2 copies in our home. Can't wait to share it with the children.
Give thanks. My Raja means give thanks. My lords and empresses, give thanks to everyone. Any other comments? Any summary comment? Ras Jalani, Ras Robbie, beloved, honorable, Mama Eleanor, anyone? Okay. So the future. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks, Russ Wayne. I just wanted to add that in addition to accessibility of information, we should also provide information that people can use to accrue economic revenue in their own communities. So for example, I made a documentary film, Awodie Remembering the Womb, which I shared in the chat some sessions ago. But the film was then given to the Empress Menen Foundation in Ghana, as well as the Rastafari Council of Ghana and individual sistren to then sell in their own communities to gain revenue for themselves. So that's another model of reparative scholarship that we could also consider.
Rastafari, that's an important one, and it perhaps also speaks to relations going forward with ones who are outside of the Rastafari community who would otherwise want to vulturize the mind of Rastafari, for them to respect the authority of an institution as the Sosa Crew or Rastafari University, and then come to that table of both expectation and knowledge, so that when whatever comes from Rastafari comes from the sources that are charged with that particular avenue of Rastafari development. And since the university is an educational space, certainly, and I collectively with those who are the lettered philosophers and those who are the philosophers of the high grade, they're philosophers nonetheless. And collectively, I and I have that responsibility to share one sound ultimately, or multiple sounds headed towards one objective of peace, love, and the goodness of the man himself, Haile Selassie the First Rastafari. So yes, any other comments or questions, closing remarks?
I
Sister
probably,
Carice?
you had, oh, Sister Carice, go ahead.
Yes, I want to take the opportunity to say thanks once more to the organizers, you know, for doing the work, listening to the youngsters too, because I'm sure they're speaking to a lot of us, just reminding us of what is important, and this is very timely. So we look forward to seeing the expansion of it. And something that I was reasoning in my group earlier is I know sometimes for sensationalism, I guess, and I guess to just prod things out of people, you know, we like to use words like contentious and that kind of thing. But my experience with every class that we've had thus far, you know, I keep saying that we're living scrolls. So we are working out the kinks. We are speaking from the heart. And the way that I speak here is the same way that I speak in class. You know, nobody can put anything in my head if I don't connect with it. And if I have a view, I'm going to express it. So we give thanks for the space to share openly. And you know, the matter that even came up with Jake once again, you know, respect for the work that you're doing. I will personally check it out. My comment with that is just me being very honest and uttering the words that I know the hosts will listen to, like everybody else, and then we'll continue to do the work that we need to do to bring this thing to the highest. So it is going to take the truthful contributions from everyone. And we already know that beautiful things are happening, because a plus that comes from school is the social connectivity. And some of us have already been connecting and seeing how we can collaborate, partner, co-create. So we're just looking for more expansive things to come from it. You know, it's been an honor to share this space and give thanks to have elders like Rasteku, you know, Jalani, the Blue Fire Sisterings. We're definitely looking forward to connecting to that some more. I'd never heard of that term until a few weeks ago through Sister Colleen, and now we get a chance to study it. So just blessings on blessings, and we're looking forward to being a part of whatever iteration of this happens. I think it's important to mix the underground with the scholarly manifestations. So yeah, blessings and much gratitude, Raswayne, you know, Toby, everybody who is a part of it, Dominic, all the students in class, and we're looking forward to keep the works going. Petrie, yeah, love, sister, blessings.
Rastafari, give thanks, give thanks, give thanks, Sister Carice.
As you know, Raswayne, that we're entering our closing, or
yes,
informal closing.
and I are. And so this is the final call for any sounds in this forum. Otherwise, just know that the future of Rastafari studies are good. The future looks good, it is good. The studies will be comprehensive and will be reflective of the reality of the man and his children who live the experience of Rastafari. Thank you so much for being in the space. Please look forward to reconnecting in the next forum, which is the closing of the summer program.
That's Raswayne. That's what I was saying to you, that we
yes,
could go straight
We're going
into.
straight in.
Oh,
It's a sort of informal closing. So Ras Robbie, I'm thinking that the two chancellors, Ras Wayne and Ras Jalani, could take 5 minutes. I'm directing 5 minutes to give their opening comments as we go into the formal closing. I do know, Ras Robbie, that we have some little things to share with the students in terms of moving forward.
Yes, sir.
And then we give a formal thank you, and that
Yes, sir.
ends the day.
That's right. And this lioness, what time will we end? Well, it was never going to be on time, man, but it will be on time. So probably another 15 minutes, something like that. But I know that Ras Jalani, we had a little text from His Majesty on education, which I think we shared in the WhatsApp. If one of the item could maybe just start the closing with reading that text.
All right, give thanks, Ras Robbie. It's raining where I am, and the zinc roof has some holes, but we give thanks for all that has been said and shared in this space. In some real ways, this has been a historic project, just to think through what this could be, and then to be able to deliver over the last 9 days what we have done. The conversations, even as they are climaxing around future of Rastafari studies, is not a conversation that has been had really much or extensively before. So even those inputs are critical in how this is framed going forward. Another first, at least for me, was the way we pioneered the teachings of the mother, you know, almost to use a problematic metaphor, almost like breastfeeding into the start, um, afforded the juxtaposition of the voices of our mothers leading us at the start of the session. I found that very inspirational. The work of Mama Willeti and Rases Jazanai, particularly, I found constructive for beginning to appreciate the unspoken aspect of the power of the Trinity. I want to thank all of the students. They've allowed us an opportunity to really talk among ourselves, perhaps a little too much, and if that happened too often, please accept our apologies for getting too enthusiastic with the sharing of information and stimuli, which is what this forum has afforded. And I've said it before, in a sense, this continues to share a backstage that many of us here have been sharing for a while. So, you know, our move to take this further is really an interest in developing community, expanding that community, and really allowing persons generally the space that we have come to relish. Any bit of factoid information, just problematizing among ourselves has been shared in ways that I have found very, very useful. I know Dominic, who joined us early as a graduate student, has benefited tremendously from what he has been exposed to. I'm grateful for the way he has employed himself in just supporting the needs. He was named our first graduate assistant, not by any position that we had designated, but by just virtue of how he had made himself available and was operating at a very high level. Am I being heard? I'm not sure if I'm being heard.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we can hear. We can hear. It's
So
raining, but we can hear.
all right. So in a real sense, the summer school has launched us into the real world with a real community of interests and ideas that we're now responsible for. And we want to invite you all to continue to keep us responsible, hold us accountable for what you see here as a potential that brought you here and what you expect this potential to further develop as. Persons who were not on our planning committee but were parts of our coordination and facilitation, Mama Eleanor, particularly, your opening and treatment address charge has really set the tone for what we have experienced over the last 7-8 days. Deep, frank, constructive engagement around something that is very critical and very, very meaningful, important to us. And we know how important it is to you just by virtue of your presence. So we really give thanks for that. And not just yourself, but others who have participated. I see Warrior King is here with us. I've seen where Paul Burke was here at some point in time, and others who have decided that this is a conversation that is meaningful at several levels. So I want to, at this point in time, Ras Ruben co-share and all of the ones who have come in to support the word sound that this summer school brings. We're going to just read an extract at this point from a graduation exercise presided over by His Majesty at the University of Addis Ababa. And he says, this graduation ceremony is an occasion not merely for recapitulating and recounting the fruits of past efforts in terms of examination results and of degrees and diploma awarded, but also for fixing one's sight onto future accomplishments, obligations, and possibilities. We all know that the need for good leadership in every walk of life is much greater today than ever before. Every aspect of living demands guiding hands. Business, the professions, the fine arts, the mechanical arts, and all of you young people who have been given enriching opportunities of an advanced education will in the future be called upon to shoulder in varying degrees the responsibility of leading and serving the nation. It is important, however, to remember that leadership does not mean domination. The world is always well supplied with people who wish to rule and dominate others. The true leader is of a different sort. He seeks effective activities which has a truly beneficent purpose. He inspires others to follow in his way and hold aloft the torch of wisdom, leads the way for society to realize its genuinely great aspiration. You have learned from your study of history that the story of nations is often told in terms of the accomplishments of individuals. In every significant event in history, you'll find a courageous and determined leader, an inspiring goal or objective, and an adversary who sought to foil his efforts. In any normal society, everyone has some opportunity to show himself as a leader. Even the mechanical clerk who has an assistant assigned to him, not to speak of the doctor with all the helpers, or the officer who commands his troops, is a leader. Within his own sphere, each has the same opportunity for showing ability and the same potential satisfaction as has the leader of a government. The leader is marked out by his individual craftsmanship, his sensibility and insight, his initiative and energy. Leaders are people who raise the standard by which they judge themselves and by which they are willing to be judged. The goal chosen, the objectives selected, the requirements imposed are not merely for their followers alone. They develop with commensurate energy, the devotion their own skill and knowledge in order to reach the standard they themselves have set. This wholehearted acceptance of the demands imposed by ever higher standards is the basis of all human progress. A love for high quality, we must remember, is essential in a leader. Dependability is another requirement in a leader. To be dependable is to be willing to accept responsibility and to carry it faithfully. A leader will always be willing to take counsel from his people, but will often have to act, the rain is intruding a little, will always have to act on what his own mind tells him is right. This demands that the leader has trained himself out of any inordinate fear of making mistakes. He who has not learned to render prompt and willing service to others will find it difficult to win and keep the goodwill and cooperation of his subordinates. Further, a leader must possess initiative, which is the creative ability to think in new ways and to do new things. The leader has always to stay ahead. He cannot afford to set up a procedure and then fold his hands and linger lazily watching it work. He cannot be content merely to see new trends and take advantage of them. He must keep his imagination vividly alive so as to originate ideas and to start trends. A good leader is devoted to his work and will willingly forego even the demands of sleep to see its accomplishment. This does not mean that he is impetuous. On the other hand, he maintains a balance between emotional drive and sound thinking. His labors, which sometimes appear excessive, derive from his firm realization that unless a man undertakes more than he can possibly do, he will never be able to do all he can do. It is his enthusiasm that stimulates his energy. No matter what our point of departure, in speaking of leadership, we reach the inescapable conclusion that the art of leadership consists in the ability to make people want to work for you when they are really under no obligation to do so. The true leader is one who realizes by faith that he is an instrument in the hands of God and dedicates himself to be a guide and inspirer of the noble sentiments and aspirations of the people. He will kindle interest, teach, aid, correct, and inspire. We've shared this reading from His Majesty to emphasize the critical takeaway that we wish to afford those who have joined us. And as someone who spent a lot of time in the space of the university, the rhetoric of leadership is not emphasized in the way that we've heard His Majesty dwell on what is the responsibility of this education. Leadership, he has indicated to us, takes many forms, from head of state to head of construction site. The point is that all of our accomplishments are attainable because of leadership pushing us to do more than we think we're able to, and to do it freely, willingly. In a real sense, we have to give thanks to those who have offered themselves to support the project under Robbie's leadership. The summer school has materialized itself. Those of you who don't have a history will know that the School of the Sacrament, Rastafari University, began through the insistence of the IDOR support we had, Ras Wayne in particular, to say that let us move ahead and have a soft launch. And that word soft was introduced December 21st, 2020 as our first attempt to begin to work together under the rubric that you are now seeing as the Rastafari University. So it's still a very short formal journey, which is still formalizing. But in particular, we are happy to have had people here on this mission. And just to seal up, there are many things that could have been shared as a summer school, but I'm convinced that the right things were shared. And that's just something that Jawa has demonstrated, you know. Going forward, I ask that you pay attention to how it is that we have taken on board your critique, as well as represented our own vision for our further development. So stay tuned is what I would ask. I'm going to turn over to Ras Wayne, but I want to particularly just recognize all the students who enrolled in the summer school. Many of them were really allowing themselves to be guided in our hands, and that was clear, and appreciating the guidance that we provided. I think all of your criticisms are germane to our project refinement. I want to, before I close, just thank all of the faculty, persons as mentioned before, but Sister Imani Tafara Amma, whose, you know, her experience and professionalism were crucial in getting us off the ground, and she has consistently afforded us as much of her time as she's able to do. Really appreciative of that. Raskaimo, Brother Jakes, here I want to acknowledge the appreciation love we have for your contribution in this space and consistency in helping us to work through all of the things that present themselves. I want to also recognize my little sister Shamara, who has done a masterful job at just, you know, helping to keep us moving in the best way as demonstrated by her professionally and with depth and relevance always. And all of you who have been drawn to this space for whatever reason, we thank you for that level of trust and what we take as initiation. You know, if this summer school is to be better framed, this initiation from which we will expect our fruits to unfold in a future in keeping with our visions and objectives. So that's it from Ayman Raswain. I know you have much to say, so I feel it. Give thanks.
Russ Wayne, can I just come in just for a second, just with some administrative things before the eye seals?
Please go forward. Go forward.
Yes, I'll give thanks. So there's just a few administrative things. Firstly, that we are still processing all the recordings for the sessions. They will be uploaded. They'll be uploaded on the Slack site, and we'll also post when we're doing that on the WhatsApp. We'll also check with the conveners about any other materials that they want to pass forward to the students based on their courses. A reminder that these are all for personal educational use for the students, and the Slack site will stay up for 6 months with those links. Those who ordered certificates of completion will be in touch with them to arrange delivery. So we'll be in touch over the next week or two for that. We have everyone's emailing list, and so we'll be using the emailing list to update ones with further developments from SOSACRU. And the last organizational point is to give thanks to Sis Colleen, who has been a steel beam running through the center of this Rastafari University, and she's always been there. She's always been timely from the beginning to the end. So we give thanks to Sis Colleen. And Ras Wayne, over to the eye to seal up.
Yeah, man, give thanks. Rastafari blessings to all. How good and how pleasant it is for good people to be gathered in a space of learning, of understanding of self, and of investigation of our own spiritual journeys and our human journeys, taking us into the space of the Rastafari University School of Sacrament. Give thanks to all who have shared the past 9 days with I, but more importantly, to the Rastafari pioneers and elders who laid the cornerstone for the Rastafari movement that originated in the region. And I give thanks to the Divine Majesties, Emperor Haile Selassie I and Meninas for their life examples and inspiration in our lives and for this movement. And I thank the Divine Majesties, the Almighty, for the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of these great ancestors and still stand firm on the principles of goodness, on the principles of humanity, not having lost our humanity, but increased our capacity to even do more in the human realm, thus advancing even knowledge and education from the very worldview of Rastafari. And I give thanks to the Idaho family, our president, Dr. Dina Marie Beresford, Mama Waleti, our beloved Rasis Jazanai Kush, Dr. Kush from the Lalabella Institute and also a member of IDOR, our beloved Raseko Tafari from Frontline Publishers, also a member of IDOR, Ras Jalani, Naya, and the inspiring work he brought to I, also a member of IDOR, but certainly a stalwart in his own right. Ras Robbie for the inspiration in terms of due diligence and work that he has brought forward to the table. For Ras Kaimo, Brother Dominique, Brother Queen, Empress Shamara, Mama Santua, Mama Tafari Ama, for all the beautiful families, our beloved matriarch, Mama Eleanor Wint, and for all those who gave us the opportunity to honor them with words, sound, and love, and sharing with them, for those who came in the space and inspired us through their energies, Sister Carice, among others. We thank you all, and I thank you, and look forward to the next distillation of the Rastafari University, whether it is in the summer program or a webinar series. Please look forward to that. Our work is only just beginning, but our focus is as disciplined as ever. Our intention is as sharp as ever, and our victory is assured as ever. So please look forward to us coming with another series of work, which only adds to this great, good blessing that is represented in this forum today. I seal then only with the words of our Divine Majesties, who said to I, what is needed above all is patience, which accept delays while striving to overcome them, and tolerance, which comprehends our weaknesses, our narrow self-interest, and our selfish ambitions, while seeking to stiffen our fiber and moral and devotion to principle, which alone can arm and shield and support I, as I toil to better the lot of Africans and humanity all over. Remember, unless I have the fixity of purpose to rise above ourselves, I will be broken on the wheels of our own inventions and become slaves of our own despotism. Africa and our humanity demands our higher selves, and therefore the School of Sacrament represents our higher abilities, our higher sense, and an aspiration for the greater good. This I pray through the power of the Divine Majesties will be done according to I will, the will of the Most High. Rastafari blessings and love, family. Looking forward to all. If I have not called out a name, it's not by virtue of any disrespect or disregard. It's that aging problem that happens to some of us. One perfect love, my family. Blessings and give thanks.